is Yako Tenma's Manga Evil God Deck. If you want to see this deck in action, be sure to check out the deck showcase video from just a couple days ago, but otherwise let's get straight into this. Now please excuse my voice, I just had surgery a couple days before recording this, so it's a little bit hoarse, but it should be alright. So starting off, this deck is running a few manga-only cards, and it is mainly only running cards that Yako actually used. Yako is from the Yu-Gi-Oh! R manga, if you didn't know. He uses the Evil God cards, which we've got here. So we have one copy of each of the manga versions of the Evil Gods. One of the Devil's Avatar, the Devil's Dreadroot, and the Devil's Eraser. These cards are mostly the same as their real-life counterparts, with a couple exceptions, the main ones being that first, they can be special summoned, unlike the real-life versions, and they have basic protection from card effects. The other difference is that these cards are also Divine Beast, which makes them a lot easier to use when we mix it with some of the real-life cards. So we run one of each of these because, of course, there is only one of each in existence in the manga, so we can only include one. Next up for our monster lineup, we have 3 copies of Angel 01. Angel 01 is one of the better cards in the deck. This card is great in that he can special summon himself, making him a perfect tribute, and he also gives us an extra tribute summon per turn while on the field, making it one of the best cards in the game for summoning your god cards. Next up, we have 3 copies of Tellus, the Little Angel. When Tellus is sent from the monster zone to the graveyard, he special summons a Tellus Wing token, which is fantastic. Also, while it's in the graveyard, you can banish it and one spell from your hand to special summon 2 extra Tellus Wing tokens, giving us 3 tributes once this guy hits the graveyard, which is again just fantastic. Next up, we have one monster that Yako does not actually use in the manga. That is Gizmek Mikami, the Ferocious Fanged Fortress. Gizmek Mikami is fantastic. He can be normal summoned without tributing if 6 or more of your cards are banished, which is very easy with this deck, as you'll see soon. And he has the effect that lets you discard a monster to add the Devil's Dreadroot from your deck to your hand, which is just a really great way to get out one of our Wicked Gods if we don't already have it in our hand. Next up for our monster lineup, we just have most of the monsters that Yako used in the manga that have been made into real cards, which are slightly better than their manga versions, but honestly, they aren't that fantastic, so we won't really be going into these as much as Angel 01 or Tellus the Little Angel, but we still want to include them because Yako uses them, so this is a Yako Tenma deck, and they're not all that bad. As long as you have one of your Wicked Gods in your hand, you should be able to pretty easily summon it to the field. So first of all, we have one copy of Beast King Barbaros, which is definitely not a bad card. A good 1900 beat stick can also be tributed using 3 monsters to destroy all cards our opponent controls. We have one copy of Machine Lord which is, again, one of the better cards that can attack all monsters our opponent controls once each. The main reason we have these 2 cards is, of course, to be able to summon our fusion Beast Machine King Barbaros which is actually a really fairly decent card if you get both of these out on the field or graveyard. You can bring out this guy who can attack all of our opponent's monsters with 3800 attack, which is definitely not bad at all. Next for Yako's monster lineup, we have one copy of Belial, Marquis of Darkness. This card isn't fantastic as he does require 2 tributes, however you can special summon him with Monster Reborn or Silent Doom. This card just provides basic protection for our other monsters from targeting for attacks or spell and trap effects, which is definitely not a bad effect. Next up, we have the manga version of Gap, the Divine Soldier. Only difference between this card and the real version of Gap is that this card gains attack for each Divine Beast type monster in your hand, that being either of your 3 Wicked Gods. Next up, we have the manga version of Summoner Monk. This card was used by Yako when he was controlling his brother Gecko. This card is a little bit different to the real-life version and a hell of a lot better. The only difference is that it basically has no cost. Once per turn, you can special summon 1 level 4 monster from your deck, and the summoned monster cannot attack that turn. While Summoner Monk isn't a great card, and there's not a lot of targets for summoning with this, being able to special summon an extra monster on the field, especially when running god cards, is never a bad thing. So Summoner Monk will mainly use that to get out our Machine Lord but can also be used to summon Lirage, the god of archery, which has a fairly decent effect to destroy one of our opponent's monsters, and Votis, who actually doesn't have a bad effect, could potentially add one of our cards from the deck to the hand, or just rearrange cards on top of our deck, which again, not a bad effect at all, and is one of our better monsters, these 2 level 4s here, but overall, not the best cards, not really what you want to be seeing. Finally, for our monster lineup, we have one copy of Casamola. This card would be kind of good if its effect didn't rely on being normal summoned. Otherwise, yeah, it's okay, it's not fantastic. Okay, that's all for our monsters. Next, let's go into the spells. First, we have 2 copies of the anime manga version of Devil Sanctuary, which summons a Metal Fiend token that can be tributed. I think that's the difference. Let me just check that. Oh, there's literally no difference. Okay, so next up we have 2 copies of Devil Sanctuary, also known as Fiend Sanctuary in real life, or in the English version. And then we have 3 copies of what is probably the best spell in this deck, Multiply. This is the manga version of Multiply. The difference with this is that it special summons any number of copies in the same position of one monster you control with 500 or less attack. So Multiply does what it does in real life, except you can use it on any monster with 500 or less attack, not just Karibo. So the targets that we have for Multiply are, of course, our Metal Fiend token, our Talus the Little Angel, and Angel 01, as well as your Talus Wing tokens work as well. If you have the Wicked Dreadroot on the field too, you can also use it on Summoner Monk and Casamola. Multiply is fantastic. If you get this card with a target on the field, you can summon up to 5 monsters, 5 tokens to your field, which can then immediately be used for the tribute summon of one of your Wicked Gods, or it can even be used for going into a Link monster with up to Link 5, which is just fantastic. I don't need to tell you that that is a really good effect. So Multiply is a fantastic card for this deck. Can also be used to just summon 5 monsters to protect your life points. Next up, we have 1 copy of the real-life version of Divine Evolution. We only really need 1 copy of this card. It's not that fantastic, especially when running the manga versions of the gods, but it does provide them with an extra 1000 attack and defense, and the effect to force our opponent to send one of their monsters to the graveyard when our Wicked God attacks. Next, we have 1 copy of the manga version of Divine Doom, Silent Doom. This targets 1 monster in your graveyard and special summons it in defense position. Doesn't need to be a normal monster. This card is used by Yako in the manga. And finally, the last of Yako's spells, we have 1 copy of Power Collapse. This card is a little bit confusing, but basically, if you hit something with your monster, the attack just sprays out and destroys the rest of your opponent's monsters, more or less. You'll have to read its effect yourself, but this card is not bad, especially when you've got a god on the field. Next up, we have a few extra spells just to give this deck a little bit more of a power boost that it really needs. We have 1 copy of Monster Reborn. This is especially good when we have the manga versions of the Wicked Gods, which can be special summoned, and it can also be used to special summon any monster from our graveyard that we can use as a tribute or link component. Next, we have 3 copies of Soul Crossing. Since the manga versions of the evil gods are divine beasts, we can use Soul Crossing to tribute our opponent's monsters, and it also gives us an extra tribute summon for that turn. So definitely need to run 3 of these. If you have this card plus one of your evil gods in your hand, you can very easily bring it out. Next, we have 1 copy of Foolish Burial. This card has a few uses. 1, it can get cards in our graveyard, which we can then bring back with Silent Doom or Monster Reborn, allowing us to go into a tribute summon. It just gives us an extra tribute for bringing out our gods. It can also be used to send our gods themselves to the graveyard to bring them back with Monster Reborn. And also, this card is great for sending Beast King Barbaros or Machine Lord to the graveyard, which will set up for the summon of our Beast Machine King Barbaros which is, again, a really great card. Next up, we have some very basic cards. We have 2 copies of Pot of Desires, 1 copy of Pot of Extravagance, and 3 copies of Pot of Prosperity. Pot of Prosperity is definitely the best one of the bunch, as this card will allow us to easily search, hopefully easily search for one of our evil gods, or any of our Angel 01, Talus the Little Angel, or Multiply. This card makes it a lot easier to get to those cards that we really need, and gives us 6 banish cards for the easy summon of Gizmek Mikami, so does the rest of your pots, and it also just puts the cards on top of our deck on the bottom of our deck, making it, again, easier to get the cards that we need. Finally, we have our traps. We have 2 cards that Yako uses. We use the real-life versions of these, the first being Intruder Alarm, Yellow Alert. When our opponent's monster declares an attack, we can special summon 1 monster from our hand, but return it to our hand at the end of the battle phase. This is not a bad card. It also forces your opponent cannot target other monsters for attacks except the monster that you summoned. Next we have 1 copy of Level Resist Wall, which is just really good for getting out 3 tributes on the field very easily. And finally, 1 copy of Skill Drain. Skill Drain does not affect the manga versions of the Wicked Gods, and the rest of our monsters have pretty really awful effects, so Skill Drain definitely needed in this deck, definitely not a bad addition. Can also be used in combination with Beast King Barbaros to get it 3000 attack without tributing, which is really good, and of course, shuts down all of our opponent's monsters. That is all for the main deck, and that is really all that you need to know for this deck. The main strategy, of course, is just to get out our Wicked Gods as quickly as possible, using Angel 01, a really good card for an extra tribute and special summon, Tell Us the Little Angel to give us those tokens, and of course, Multiply. Getting out 3 tributes with this deck I've found is fairly easy, especially when you've got Soul Crossing as well and Multiply. These cards are absolutely fantastic, so summoning the evil gods with this deck, definitely not too hard, even though most of the monster lineup isn't really that fantastic. Next for our side deck, we just run 3 traps. I didn't really put any effort into the side deck, but Yako runs these cards Junk Dealer. Junk Dealer is one of Yako's better cards. When our opponent fusion summons a monster, all the fusion materials that we sent to the graveyard for that summon are special summoned to your side of the field. This card can very easily get out some tributes and just gets monsters on our field, which is great, but of course only works against fusion summons, so that's why we have it in the side deck. If our opponent runs fusion monsters, then we definitely want to go into Junk Dealer. Finally, we have a very basic extra deck. We have the manga version of Beast Machine King Barbaros which is a fusion monster in the manga, but we give it its real life effect that you can special summon it by banishing a machine type monster and a beast warrior type monster from our field and or graveyard, that being our Beast King Barbaros and Machine Lord This card's manga effect is that it can attack all monsters our opponent controls once each, and if this card battles, your opponent takes no battle damage. However, it does have 3800 attack and can very easily clear our opponent's field of monsters, setting up for an OTK with one of our gods. Next up, we have a bunch of Link monsters. We have pretty basic stuff: Access Code Talker, Appaloosa Bow of the Goddess. We have 1 Firewall Dragon, 5-headed Link Dragon, IP Masquerena, Nightmare Phoenix, Nightmare Unicorn, 1 Link Spider, 1 Link Karibo, 1 copy of SP Little Knight, Salaman Great Almirage, 1 Saryuja Skull Dread, we have Unchained Abomination, and finally Underworld Goddess of the Closed World. These cards were mainly chosen for a couple reasons. Either firstly, the ease of summon. The main way that we're going to be going into Link monsters is of course with the effect of Multiply to summon 5 monsters on the field, and a lot of the powerful Link monsters have restrictions, such as Appaloosa has to be summoned with 2 monsters with different names except tokens, or you have your Access Code Talker needs effect monsters, the Nightmares need monsters with different names. These cards obviously can't just be summoned with our tokens. However, we do include cards like Link Spider or Link Karibo, which can be summoned with our tokens. We also have Firewall Dragon, and of course 5-headed Link Dragon can be summoned with the tokens as well. You can use any of these cards to link our tokens into one of these Link monsters, and then use these Link monsters to go into the bigger ones, like your Underworld Goddess or your Appaloosa, or just anything that requires specific materials, that being effect or Link monsters. Otherwise, your Link monsters are very easy to get out as long as you have Multiply. You just go into a Link monster that can be gone into, and then bring out the bigger ones using those monsters. So that is it for this deck. This is Yako Tenma's manga deck with a slight upgrade. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like this deck, be sure to leave a like, comment down below, let me know what you think, let me know any changes that you would make, and let me know if you try this deck out for yourself. Of course, all the cards used in this deck are also real cards, I'm pretty sure. Most of the cards, except for like Power Collapse, and of course Beast Machine King is an effect monster in the real life version. But otherwise, most of these cards are real cards, so you could swap them out for the real versions. Just keep in mind it will not be as good. You also can't use Soul Crossing with the real versions of the Wicked Gods. And of course we can't use Multiply because we don't run Karibo. Also in real life, Multiply tokens can't be tributed for a tribute summon, making them not really good for God cards. Which is another exception to the manga version. So if you want to run this deck in real life, those are just a few changes that you would have to make. Otherwise, you can keep this deck pretty much the same as it is. Just swap out the multiply and the soul crossing for something else and you'll be good to go. So thank you all so very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Again, if you did, leave a like, comment down below, and subscribe, because next week we'll be looking into what is, I think, possibly the best Wicked God deck that has ever been created, and I made it myself, and that video will be coming out next week, so be sure to stay tuned for that if you like the Wicked Gods. We've got a couple other Wicked God decks coming up as well, but you'll definitely want to see next week's video. So thank you all so very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. My name is Ben Sincaro, and until next time, see ya.